Okay. Hello, English readers, and welcome to Lydie's Book Club live read along. I'm Lydie and I'm an English teacher in France. I'm also the founder of Lydie's Book Club, in which I host live readings of adaptations of classics of English literature and contemporary novels. Each month, we read and explore a different book for all levels of English. And once a week, I meet the members of the book club in a live workshop via Zoom to discuss the chapters of the book that we are currently reading. And this month, in this book club, I also tend to prioritize books that are written by women. And this month we are reading the contemporary novel Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This is our August live read along. So it's the level of we are going to read the book in its integral form. So you need to have a C1 plus advanced level of English. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit too difficult for you to understand. So make sure that you check carefully about the level of English. And if you would like to know more about the novel, maybe that would be a first step for you. And if you would like to know more about Julia Armfield, the author, and her work, I invite you to listen to the podcast episode 23, an introduction to Julia Armfield and Our Wives Under the Sea, which is available on Lydie's Book Club YouTube channel and also on the Spotify podcast Read in English. Thank you, Claudia, by the way, for listening to the podcast. I hope that you enjoyed and learned more about the novel. So feel free to leave me a comment once you've watched the podcast or listened to the podcast on Spotify. I'm always very curious to know what you think, and or anything that you would like to let me know, or next read you would like to do in the book club as well. So over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to host 10 Instagram live reading sessions that you will be able to rewatch on the YouTube channel and on the Spotify podcast, Read in English, as always. And in addition to these 10 live reading sessions, I'm going to host 3 live workshops based on the novel so that the members of the book club will be able to improve their speaking skills and share their views on the novel. These live workshops will also be hosted, via Zoom on the following 3 Saturdays. So make sure you subscribe to the book club to be part of the conversation. You can find all the information and the dates of the workshops by clicking on the link in the description of this video. And if you're live, you can click on the link in my bio. Also, I'm pleased to announce that you can now purchase the 3-part live workshop on Daisy Jones and the Six. This is our July live read along. And again, we read the original text. So you need to have a C1 plus level of English. And it's available on my website store. And once you purchase the workshop, you'll be asked to create your own login, which will give you access to a private space to watch the videos at your own pace, in your own time. So that's quite nice, especially when you're busy. You don't necessarily have the time, but maybe this summer you might have the time to watch the sessions. So today it's session 1 of our reading of Our Wives Under the Sea, and we are going to read pages 3 to 19. And I'm going to get started. I will start straight away with the reading of the novel. So it's not like I'm going to do an introduction or some sort, because I've done the podcast about the novel. So I would say that if you would like to know about the novel first, then well, you can do other way, any way you want. Whether you want to listen and see if you like it, then keep listening. Okay, let's start. So this book is dedicated to Rosalie, on dry land, for Rosalie on dry land and elsewhere. Right, so there is this extract from Moby Dick here in the first page. Consider the subtleness of the sea. So it's Moby Dick talking here. Consider. Well, I'm actually wondering, have you read Moby Dick? I would like to be interested to know if you know the novel. I know by name, but shame on me, I haven't read this book. So, but I think that it's about adventure in the sea. So I would be interested to know if you know this, if you've read this novel. Consider the subtleness of the sea, how its most dreaded creatures glide under water, unapparent for the most part, and treacherously hidden beneath the loveliest tints of azure. Consider also the devilish brilliance and beauty of many of its most remorseless tribes, as the dainty, embellished shape of many species of sharks. Consider once more the universal cannibalism of the sea, all whose creatures prey upon each other, carrying on eternal war since the world began. Consider all this, and then turn to the green, gentle, and most docile earth. Consider them both, the sea and the land. And do you not find a strange analogy to something in yourself? For as this appalling ocean surrounds the verdant land, so in the soul of man there lies one insular Tahiti, full of peace and joy, but encompassed by all the horrors of the half-known life. God keep thee. Push not off from that isle, thou canst never return. Moby Dick. And then it's Jaws answering. Oh, you haven't? Good, yeah. Okay, so it makes the two of us. And then it seems like there is a character called Jaws in the novel. There is a clinical name for it, isn't it? Isn't there? Drowning. Oh, sorry. I have something that makes a little bit of noise. I'm gonna try. Oh, here we go. Right. Quite interesting way to enter the novel. Okay, so you have here the second page, the next page, called Sunlight Zone. So the book is divided in, let me remind, oh, sorry, let me check. Oops, a bit noisy here. So it's divided in how many zones? So there are 5 zones. So the book is divided in 5 zones: the sunlight zone, the twilight zone, the midnight zone, the abyssal zone, and the hadal zone. So there are 5 parts in this book. So now it's the sunlight zone. So as I mentioned in the podcast episode, it's spelled Miri, but I listened to an interview. Well, it was like conference festival in which Julia Armfield was talking about this book, and it seems like the pronunciation is Mary, right? So I'll try to remember. Anyway, the deep sea is a haunted house, a place in which things that ought not to exist move about in the darkness. And still is the word Leah uses, tilting her head to the side as if in answer to some sound, though the evening is quiet, dry hum of the road outside the window and little to draw the ear besides. The ocean isn't still, she says, further down than you think. All the way to the bottom, things move. She seldom talks this much or this fluently, legs crossed and gaze towards the window, the familiar slant of her expression, all her features slipping gently to the left. I'm aware by now that this kind of talk isn't really meant for me, but it is simply a conversation she can't help having, the result of questions asked in some closed-off part of her head. What you have to understand, she says, is that things can thrive in unimaginable conditions. All they need is the right sort of skin. We are sitting on the sofa, the way we have taken to doing in the evenings since she returned last month. So remember, Leah went on a deep sea mission, and it seems like we are. The novel starts when she just came back a month ago. In the old days, we used to sit on the rug, elbows up on the coffee table, like teenagers, eating dinner with the television on. These days, she rarely eats dinner, so I prefer to eat mine standing up in the kitchen to save on mess. Sometimes she will watch me eat, and when she does this, I chew everything to a paste and stick my tongue out until she stops looking. Most nights we don't talk. Silence like a spine through the new shape our relationship has taken. Most nights, after eating, we sit together on the sofa until midnight. Then I tell her I'm going to bed. When she talks, she always talks about the ocean, folds her hands together, and speaks as if declaiming to an audience quite separate from me. There are no empty places, she says, and I imagine her glancing at cue cards, clicking through slides, as if she was doing a presentation. However deep you go, she says, however far down, you'll find something there. I used to think there was such a thing as emptiness, that there were places in the world one could go and be alone. This, I think, is still true. But the error in my reasoning was to assume that alone was somewhere you could go, rather than somewhere you had to be left. It's 3 o'clock, and I'm tilting the phone receiver away from my ear to avoid the hold music, which appears to be Beethoven's Battle Symphony, played on a toy synthesizer. The kitchen is a junkyard of coffee cups, drain clogged with tea bags. One of the lights above the cooker hood is flickering. Muscle pulse in the corner of my vision like a hissing eyelid. Tissing eyelid. Not sure about pronunciation. Tissing. In the counter, the following: an orange, half-peeled, 2 knives, a plastic bag of bread. I haven't yet made lunch. Pulled various items out of a random about an hour ago before finding myself unequal to the task. Stuck to the fridge, a sheet of paper with the shopping list scratched down in purple biro. Milk, cheese, sleep aid, any, sticking plasters, table salt. The old music buzzes on, and I probe around the inside of my mouth with my tongue, feel the gaps in my teeth, the way I tend to do when I'm waiting for something. One of my molars is cracked, an issue I've been ignoring for some weeks because it doesn't seem to be hurting enough to warrant a fuss. So she has a toothache, but she I think she can't be bothered to go to the dentist, or she just not taking the time. She's just pushing it away. I mean, taking the time. She's not taking the time to deal with this toothache. I draw my tongue up over the tooth, feel the rise and split where the break runs along the enamel. Don't do that, I imagine Leah saying, the way she used to do when I rolled my tongue between my teeth in public. You look like you forgot to floss. Most nights, though, I don't mention this to Leah. I dream in molars spat across the bedcloth, hold my hands beneath my chin to catch the teeth that drop like water from the lip of a tap. The general tempo of these dreams is always similar. The grasp and pull at something loose, the pause, the sudden fountain spill. Each time, the error seems to lie in the fact that I shouldn't have touched my fingers to the molar on the bottom left-hand side. Each time, the wrong switch flicked, my curiosity rewarded by a rain of teeth. Too many to catch between two palms and force into my mouth again. My gums, a bold pink line beneath my lip. The line spatters, a recorded voice interrupting the music to tell me for the 50th time that my call is important. Before the battle symphony recommences with what feels like renewed hostility. Across the room, Leah sits with her hands around a mug of water. A curious warming gesture, the way one might cradle a cup of tea. She hasn't drunk anything hot since returning. Asked me not to make my coffee too near her, since the smell from the percolator now seems to make her gag. Not to worry, she said. Yes, not to worry, she said, more than once. It'll sort itself. It sort itself. These things usually do. Sensations are difficult still. Touch painful. Smells and tastes like small invasions. I've seen Leah touch her tongue to the edge of a piece of toast and retract it, face screwed up as if in response to something tart. I'm still on hold, I say, for no reason really other than to have said it. She looks at me, slow blink. In case you were wondering, I think of adding and don't. At around 6 this morning, Leah woke and I immediately had nosebleed. Nosebleed is when your nose is, when you're bleeding from the nose. Nosebleed. I've been sleeping in the room across the hall and so didn't actually see this, but I've grown accustomed to her patterns, even at this state of half remove. I'd been ready for it. had actually woken at 6:15 in time to pass her a flannel in the bathroom, run the taps, and tell her not to put her head back. You could set your watch to it these days. Red mouth in the morning, red chin, red spill into the sink. She says, when she says anything, that's something to do with the pressure, the sudden lack thereof. Her blood retains no sense of boundaries it once recognized, and so now just flows wherever it wants. Okay, so now she didn't use, before Leah didn't used to have nosebleed, and now it seems like she has those bleedings that's quite often. It's quite recurrent. Okay. So it's quite nice. Her blood retains no sense of boundaries it once recognized, and so now just flows wherever it wants. So yeah, it's quite unpredictable now how her body reacts, and how now she's bleeding. She has nosebleed quite frequently. Sometimes she bleeds from the teeth, or rather not from the teeth, but from the gums around the teeth. The gums is this, that's the gum. Sometimes she bleeds from the teeth, or rather not from the teeth, but from the gums around the teeth, which amounts to the same thing when you're looking at her. In the days immediately following her return, blood would rise unheeded through her pores, so that sometimes I'd come in and find her pin-cushioned, dotted red as if pricked with needles. Iron Maiden, she'd said the first time, and tried to laugh. Strange sound, like the wringing out of something wet. I found the whole thing terrifying for the first few days. Panicked when she bled, jammed my shoes on and down, and demanded she let me take her to A&E. A&E is the emergency, hospital emergency. Only by degrees did I realize she had been led to expect this, or at least to expect something similar. She pushed my hands from her face in a manner that seemed almost practiced, and told me it wasn't a problem. You can't go out in those anyway, Miri, she said, looking down at the shoes. I'd forced on without looking. They don't match. So in the text, you've got the phrases that, or the sentences that Leah says in italic, because here it seems that it is the narrator of this novel is Miri, or Mary. Okay. On more than one occasion, I begged her to let me help her, and met only resistance. You don't have to worry, she would say, and then go on bleeding. And the obviousness of the problem, combined with the refusal of help, left me at first frustrated, and subsequently rather resentful. It went on too long and too helplessly, the way that anyone who sneezes more than 4 times abruptly loses the sympathy of an audience. So it was with me and Leah. Can't you stop it? I think about asking her. You're ruining the sheets. Some mornings I'd want to accuse her of doing it on purpose, and then look away, set my mouth into another shape, and pour the coffee. Think about going for a run. In the bathroom, just this morning, I passed her the flannel and watched her smear her hands with ivory soap. My mother used to say that washing your face with soap was as bad as leaving it dirty. Something about harsh chemicals, the stripping down of natural oils. Everything with my mother was always harsh chemicals. She filled a binder with clippings on the cancer risks of various meat products, sent me books on UV rays and home invasions, a pamphlet on how to build a fire ladder out of sheets. Having washed her face, Leah stepped back from the sink. She patted her face with the backs of her hands, then the palms, then abruptly curled one finger into the lead beneath her left eye. Then the right, pulling down to inspect the oiled sockets of her eyeballs, oily sockets of her eyeballs. In the mirror, her skin had the look of something dredged from water. The yellow eyes of someone drowned, of someone found floating on her back. Be all right, she said. Be all right in a minute. Now in the kitchen, a jumbling noise on the phone, a sudden click, and another robotic voice, slightly different to the one that has been repeating that my call is important, comes on the line to demand that I enter Leah's personal number, followed by a rank number, transfer number, and the statement number she should have received from the center on final demob. The voice goes on to explain that if I fail to enter these numbers in the exact order required, I'll be cut off. I do not, as I have been attempting to get through and explain, have Leah's personal number. The whole purpose of my calling the center has been to try to get hold of it. I enter all the details required aside from the personal number, at which point a third recorded voice comes on the line and proceeds to scold me in a tight robotic jabber, noting as a helpful afterthought that my call will now be terminated. Well, so this is the end of the first part of Miri, and now I'm going to start a new chapter, let's say. Okay. Did you know that until very recently, so now it's Leah. Did you know that until recently, more people had been to the moon than had dived beyond depths of 6,000 meters? I think about this often. So here, sorry, the narrator of this chapter, so it seems like there is the narrator, there are two narrators here, because it seems like when it's Miri talking, it's her, the narrator, and here when it's Leah, it's Leah's who is talking. So we'll see how it's okay. If the italic sentences, you know, in the text correspond to Miri's book, but it would make sense that she reversed the style. Well, the technique, I would say. Okay, so I start again, sorry. Did you know that until very recently, more people had been to the moon than had dived beyond depths of 6,000 meters? I think about this often. The inhospitableness of certain places, a footprint once left on the surface of the moon, might in theory remain as it is almost indefinitely. Uneroded by atmosphere, by wind, or by rain, any mark made up there could quite easily last for several centuries. The ocean is different. The ocean covers its tracks. When a submarine descends, a number of things have to happen in a fairly short span of time. Buoyancy is entirely dictated by water. Pushing up against an object with a force proportional to the weight of the water that object has displaced. So, when a submarine sits at the surface, its ballast tanks are filled with air, rendering its overall density less than that of the surrounding water, and thereby displacing less of it. In order to sink, those ballast tanks have to be filled with water, which is sucked into the vessel by electric pumps as the air is simultaneously forced out. It's a curious act of surrender when you think about it, the act of going under. To drop below the surface is still to sink. However, unintentionally, a simple matter of taking on water, just as drowning only requires you to open your mouth. Miri used to call these my sunken thoughts, tapping on the base of my skull with the flat of her hand when I grew quiet, frowning at some thought I was chasing in circle. How'd they get so far down in there? She'd say. Next thing you know, they'll be halfway down your neck. When she did this, I would often catch her palm and keep it there, take her other hand and hold it to my temple, as though surrendering the responsibility of keeping my head in one piece. It's hard to describe the smell of a submarine when it goes under. Hard to pin down, something like metal or hot grease, and something like lack of oxygen. Ammonia, the smell of all, but what's necessary filtered away. 20 minutes before we lost contact, Jelka told me she thought she smelled meat, which was strange, because I'd been thinking the same thing. A hot and savory waft, like something cooked. I remember I looked to my own fingers, half expected to find them roasting. Bent to observe the skin on my shins, on my knees, on my ankles. There was nothing, of course, and no reason at all for the smell that seemed to hit us both with such force. When Jelka repeated her claim to Matteo, he told her to hold her nose if she was so bothered, and I didn't say anything to back her up. At first, it was only the comms panel, the crackle of contact from the surface cutting out and not returning. I remember Matteo frowned and asked me to try to find a signal while he dealt with the main controls. I held down the transmission button and chanted nonsense into the radio, expecting the center to come back online any second and ask me what I was on about. 10 minutes later, when the craft's whole system went offline, it would occur to me that the comms hadn't faded like a wavering signal so much as been switched off, though by the time we all had more pressing things to deal with. Right? So, oh, no problem. Have a good evening. Bye-bye, Claudia. So here is the end of Leah's chapter, and it seems like we getting to know a little bit more on the circumstances of the drowning of the vessel, and yeah, how and the characters, well, the people who were with Leah. So we've got this character called Jelka, and then Matteo, who seem to be Leah's colleagues. So yeah, let's see now on Miri's side again. Okay. She's been home 3 weeks and I'm mostly used to everything. In the mornings, I eat and she doesn't. And then I answer emails for half an hour and ignore her wandering back and forth with wads of toilet paper wedged along her gum line to absorb the blood. I write grant applications for non-profit organizations for a living, and I've always worked from home, which never bothered me particularly until she went away and forced me into closer proximity with myself. Now that she's back, now I'm used to her being back. I can't decide whether to register her presence as relief or invasion. I make heavy weather over glasses left half empty on windowsills, over the bin not being taken out, have near constant mouth uses, and complain about unhoovered floors. At night, I dream. I grit my teeth so hard that they break off like book matches. Wow. Okay. So it seems like she's really suffering from her toothache or teeth ache or mouth, but yeah, or she's kind of inflicting this to herself. The people who live above us keep the TV on at all times, even when I know they're both out, at work or at the movies. The noise bleeds through the ceiling, downward drip of talk, of title music spilling down the wall like the damp that speckles into mold around the chimney breast. Sometimes, if I listen very closely, sometimes if I stand on a chair, I can make out the show that's playing upstairs and tune our television to the same channel, which negates the irritation a little. They seem to favor game shows and programs about people tasked with falling in love with each other in exotic location for money. So that's probably TV shows like Blind Love, or Love is Blinding or something. Hi, Keti. Hello. Thank you for joining. I hope you're well. I hope you enjoyed your little holidays and this little break that we had with the book club. So I'm page 13, right? If you want to catch up the reading and read with me. So we are page 13. They seem to favor game shows and programs about people tasked with falling in love with each other in exotic location for money. I enjoy these two, I suppose. I enjoy their fabulism, the lunar tones of teeth. Contestants on a show I often watch in tandem with the neighbors have to stare into strangers' eyes for 4 minutes uninterrupted, as studies have apparently shown this is the amount of time it takes to fall in love. Come on, this is I'll be very curious to know whether you agree with this research, whether you just need 4 minutes to fall in love with, to look at someone for 4 minutes to fall in love with that person. Yeah, I don't know what you think about this, but I'm quite doubtful of this. This often seems to work, at least for the duration of the episode. That's quite funny. Though once a male contestant threw his chair back after 2 minutes and walked off set, later stating that something he saw in his partner had unnerved him. I'm less fond of nature documentaries and tend not to bother watching my channel to the neighbors and to bother matching my channel to the neighbors when they switch these on. One evening, I fell asleep on the sofa and woke to the unusual clear sound of a voice narrating a program on California peach plants from the floor above me. Foraging insects are attached to the cavity or mouth formed by the cupping of the leaf and are hastened down into the trap by the slippery rim kept moist by naturally occurring nectar. Once caught, the insect is drowned in the plant's digestive juices and gradually dissolved. This was some months after Leah was first absent, when the phone calls from the center were still semi-regular. The kind-ish, professional-sounding voices telling me they were doing all they could. I remember, interesting here, telling me what they were doing all they could in a sense that they were searching for the vessel for Leah. I remember I lay on the sofa and listened to the show for several minutes before reaching for the remote and aiming it at the ceiling. Leah used to go up there sometimes, knock on the door late at night and ask them to turn it down. They were nice, she would tell me when she came back, brushing her hands together to indicate a job well done. Very apologetic about it. I like them. They left the TV on at night to keep the cat company. They'd turn it down, no harm, no foul. The voice from the television never altered, but I don't think Leah even particularly minded this. Going up there seemed to her to be almost the whole point of the exercise, telling the neighbors to turn it down, more important than the turning down itself. After she went away, I quickly became grateful for a noise I had previously regarded as irritating. Sunday mornings, I would stand on the kitchen table and listen to soap opera music, to upbeat voices selling nasal sprays and golden syrup and non-stick Teflon pans. I can't stand this, Leah said suddenly. She's been sitting in the corner of the room for upwards of an hour, chewing on the collar of her jumper in an odd, if reflexive gesture, like one might gnaw at a hangnail. I ask her what she means, and she doesn't say anything, only gesturing upwards as the noise from the neighbor's television fades from the closing credits of a program to a splash of advertised music in a frantic major key. I go upstairs and hammer on the door, but the neighbors don't answer. The noise of the television oddly quieter in the corridor than it seems in the flat below. It occurs to me that I have never actually laid eyes on the neighbors, that the whole time we've lived where we live, I've taken their presence as a given on the basis of evidence that is, at best, circumstantial. The footsteps and the muffled music, scrape of furniture being moved around at night. I never asked Leah a single thing about the neighbors, never once after any of the times she went up to ask them to turn it down. Is that odd? I start to wonder to myself, and then disregard the question. It barely matters. After all, since my issue is not so much with my neighbors as it is with their TV. I'm only gone a total of 6 minutes, but the time I get back, Leah has moved from the corner of the living room and is locked in the bathroom, running both the taps. This isn't entirely unusual. Quite often these days, I will wake at odd hours and hear the bathtub being filled. 4 a.m. Grey twitch of morning in the sky, about the telephone wires and water running in the bathroom, in the kitchen, in the room where the washer dryers sits. More than once, I have come into the I have come into I have come in to find Leah sitting on the edge of the bathtub, staring into the water with the fixed expression of someone barely awake. She is, as I often think at these moments, deliberating whether or not to get in. Deliberating whether or not to get in. Though at other times I interpret her expression as something more uneasy. The look of a person who has let their gaze drop too deep and now can't seem to retrieve it. Standing outside the bathroom, I think of knocking, think of asking her to let me in. I imagine I can hear the water spilling down across the floor, pooling thick across the lavender linoleum. She has, it appears, taken the electric box she uses to sleep into the bathroom. The one that arrived in the post. No return address. A parting gift from the center, along with a pair of decompression socks and a book of aphorisms bound in PVC. I hear her turn it on, hear the shiver of sound it produces, swell and of something spilling, something seething, judder and groan of something building to a roar. There is a little space here. A long time ago, we met. I think that's important. The fact of meeting, the fact I remember a sense of before. Meeting implies a point before knowing, a point before Leah and I became these fused inextricable thing. We used to make a game of remembering, elbowing each other about it. Do you remember the time I sent flowers when you were living in another city? Do you remember teaching me to swim? Do you remember the time we went out for my birthday and you spilled water all over the table and the waiter looked at us like we'd crawled from a hole in the ground? Every couple, I think, enjoys its own mythology, recollections like note cards to guide you around an exhibition. Figure A, portrait of the couple dancing at a colleague's Catholic wedding. Figure B, charcoal sketch of the couple fighting over who said what at a cocky dinner with acquaintances. Note, fine lines beneath completed sketches indicating places where the artist has repeatedly erased and redrawn. Things are easy enough to recall in isolation. Scenes appear complete unto themselves. The time we went to the fancy dress party, the time someone stole my wallet in a club, the time our train carriage got stuck underground for an hour and 45 minutes, and Leah kept hold of my hand until we started to move. You can wander the exhibition this way, picking favorites, placing dots by the frames of the pictures you most want to keep. Trickier is the task of pulling the pictures together, of connecting the points in a way that makes tangible sense. I remember the first time we kissed. The first time we slept together. The first time she held me, she'd once seen her father appear at the foot of her bed as a ghost. I remember fucking, or the abstract sense of fucking, the fact of doing it often and cheerfully, though with little recollection of one time over the next. I remember the first time she went away, the first time I traveled to see her off. I remember the last time. The fact that she was supposed to be gone for 3 weeks and disappeared for 6 months. The fact that none of us knew what had happened. Yeah. The way the center called several times to give out contradictory information before ceasing to call at all. All of this is easy enough. At close range, bright flashes, a relationship born out of evidence, the bits and pieces that make it a fact. What is harder is stepping back far enough to consider us in the altogether, not the series of pictures, but the whole that those pictures represent. I don't particularly like to do this. Stepping back too far makes me dizzy. My memory, like something punched, reeling about with its hands clapped over its face. It is easier, I think, to consider the fact of us in its many disparate pieces, as opposed to one vast and intractable thing. Easier, I think, to claw through the scatter of us in the hopes of retrieving something, of pulling some singular thing from the debris and holding it up to the light. So in pieces, then, a long time ago, we met. Right, that's quite interesting here to learn more about how Leah and Mary met. Okay, so we're going to read the last 2 pages here of today. So it's Leah's chapter. Panic is a misuse of oxygen. The first thing anyone learns in diving is how to breathe. When the console lights went off, I held my breath for a full 60 seconds, considered the wet wing shapes of my lungs. There is a practice in Norse mythology that involves the severing of the ribs from the spinal column and the lungs being drawn from the back, extracted in such a manner that the victim is supposedly still able to breathe. Variously described as a method of torture and a means of human sacrifice, there is some debate as to whether this was ever actually performed outside of literature. It would be impossible, of course, to do so with the victim still alive. The lungs wouldn't function outside of the body. And even if they did, the victim would mostly likely go into shock and stop breathing on their own. Even so, one can think of the lungs sometimes and believe it. Picture their wide, wailing chambers, the bold imperative of all they are made to contain. I don't know why I'm mentioning this, really, except that this is what I thought about in the 60-second between the system dying and the next breath. In the next breath, the system dying and the next breath I was able to take. I thought about my lungs being wrenched through my back and still swelling, contracting. Thought of water spilling into the space where my ribcage had been and my lungs going on regardless. At this point, I should note, we were still following protocol, at least to some degree. It is actually very rare for a submarine to sink, but there are guidelines in place for this eventually, as they are for all things, the most vital of which is to send a distress call without delay. The earlier you can do this, and the closer to the surface you are when you do, the more likely it is that a coast guard or a passing vessel will pick up the signal and realize that something is wrong. The problem, of course, is that sending a distress call relies on your system being online, which ours was not. I remember Matteo at the comms panel, moving his hands over the console for a moment and then looking at me. I remember, too, the disquieting lack of electric light. The switches dull. The way our craft seemed suddenly less a piece of precision, tooled engineering, and more a swiftly sinking box. Matteo was the one who checked the engines, the junction boxes, the pressure gauges. There's nothing wrong, he said. It should all be working fine. We were still descending when the system went out and already too deep to evacuate. Our CO2 scrubbers, for whatever reason, appeared to have remained intact. But with no way to control the ballast tanks, there was nothing we could do but continue to drop. Right. So that's the end of today's session. So there are quite a lot of information about the, well, it seems like we're going to get some bits and bobs of the story, and we will have to kind of put all the pieces back together to make sense of the whole story, and kind of make the connections between the events in the vessel and what really happened. So it seems like, yeah, it's still very much of a blur. We see that Leah and the crew of the submarine are at the stage where something happened, and the vessel is drowning. So yeah, I guess it's the first session, so it takes a little bit of time to get into the story, to kind of have what I've noticed as well is it personally, I don't know about you, but you can leave a message about it. You can leave a comment on this. But from one book to another, personally, it takes me a little while, sometimes to a couple pages, to get into the writing style and kind of, and also try to picture, you know, the scenes and make sense of what is happening, and also understand, kind of noticing the different characters. So you have the two main characters, Leah and Miri, and then you've got Matteo and there was this other character called Jekyll, which was mentioned by Matteo, and there is another member of the crew that Leah mentioned. Jelka, sorry, Jelka. So yeah, each time we will have to kind of make sure we don't get confused between the Leah recalling all the recalling the events in the vessel, and Miri recollecting her memories about the moment she learned that something had happened in the mission, and the present time in which she's noticing that Leah is not acting as she used to when before she left. So Keti is saying, I didn't understand a lot of things. I have to read the chapters again. Yes, definitely. So do anything that you need to do in order to get into the story, and especially that you just caught up the reading session at page 13, and we had started reading. So yeah, it's a little bit tricky to start like that. So yes, definitely reread on your own, read the start of the novel on your own, and maybe listen again the live reading, and hopefully you will feel better about the you will understand more about the story. And of course, it's not easy as well because of the style of the writer. If you remember reading, when we read White Teeth, it reminds me again, and as you might also remember, Keti, she's talking about teeth here again. She's got a toothache. At the start, she's talking about having a toothache in the beginning of the novel. So instantly that just came to my mind, like I don't know if there's something, I don't know if it's about British people having something about the teeth and talking about teeth, but here again she talks about teeth, and the fact that she's suffering from a toothache, and also that she is hurting herself by cracking her teeth, during the night. So that made me smile when internally smile when I was reading. I just wanted to keep reading and not being interrupt the reading, but that just came straight to my mind. Anyway, we will have a lot of time to discuss this in the workshop, and this first session this Saturday. But yeah, just let's sink in the first session, the first pages, and then hopefully you'll feel better about the story and feeling more comfortable to carry on with the yeah, that's funny. Yeah, and feel more comfortable about reading the next pages of the novel. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this live reading, and make sure you subscribe to the book club membership to attend our first time workshop this Saturday. So we will read pages 3 to 71 this week. So also remember that you can purchase the live workshop of Daisy Jones and the Six if you're not sure about joining the book club and you would like to have an idea of what it's about to be a member of the book club and what the live workshop look like. So I wish you a beautiful end of the day, and I will see you live tomorrow for session 2. We will read pages 20 to 33. So a couple 10-ish pages. So that's it for me tonight, and I wish you a beautiful end of the day. Bye bye. Bye bye.